All right, so what we're going to look at right now is the ways that cells, the different ways that cells can make their own or can acquire energy. Okay, the modes of that's what mode of nutrition means. Is how do you get your food essentially. So we're going to look at that, but we're also going to look at it in the context of why do plant and animal cells, if they have so much in common, still have things that aren't in common? Why are there some differences? Okay, well, almost all of the differences between a plant cell and an animal cell have to do with how plants and animals get their food. All right, if you're a plant, obviously you carry out what process? Photosynthesis. Photosynthesis produces sugar, and then you use cellular respiration to break down the sugar and release its energy. Okay, if you're an animal, you get your sugar by eating stuff. Okay, plants or animals or both. Okay, depending on whether you're a carnivore, a herbivore, and an omnivore. Okay, so you get your sugars and other nutrients that way instead of making them for yourself. Okay, and then you use cellular respiration to break it down and release its energy. Okay, so once we've gotten to the point where we have the energy containing molecules, after that it's all the same. And that's why plants and animals have so many similar structures. But the way we get to that sugar is different. All right, so we're going to look at that, and then maybe we'll even have time to get to the labeling of our diagrams, and that'll help you tomorrow when you're in the lab and you're looking at stuff underneath the microscope. All right, so key points for today. Know and understand how plant and animal cells are different. Okay, there are a few key differences and we need to know what they are. Understand why those differences are present and necessary. Like we said, they mostly have to do with how they get their energy. Okay, and thirdly, be able to correctly label plant and animal cells. So, not tomorrow, but Thursday, you will have a quiz and it will be, here's a diagram of a cell. Name and give the functions of whatever parts of it I put arrows to. All right, so this is one of those things where you got to memorize and regurgitate. Okay, for biology, you got to go over that cell diagram and know that the mitochondria burn sugar for energy and that the nucleus holds the DNA and blah, blah, blah. All right, take a question. Okay. All right. So, modes of nutrition. Okay, there's subtle differences between plant and animal cells, and we saw that the other day when we looked at the two diagrams. Okay, they do look a bit different, but there were a lot of things the same. Okay, and the different modes of nutrition is where the biggest differences occur. If you are an animal, you consume other things for food. If you are a plant, you carry out photosynthesis. Okay, the raw materials for energy are quite a bit different. Okay, for a plant, the only raw materials required to produce energy are water and carbon dioxide and sunlight. Sunlight's not really a raw material, but it's a source of energy. Okay? If you're an animal, your raw materials are other stuff to eat. No, that doesn't sound very technical, but that's what it is. It depends what you eat. Okay? If you're a lion, you eat wildebeests and whatever else you can take down. Okay? Everybody follow there. All right. So, animals are what we call chemo heterotrophs. Okay, so that's going to be a key term there. Chemo heterotrophs. All right. Strictly speaking, that word means chemical other feeder. Okay. In other words, they feed on the chemicals from other organisms. Okay. They require the organic material of other organisms, plants or animals or whatever, okay, as nourishment. So since they're eating cellular material from other organisms, they have to have some way to break that cellular material down because we're not made of sugar, right? But that's the fuel that our cells require. So somehow we have to break down the organic chemicals that other things are made of into simple sugars, right? And within our body, the job of that is done within, our digestive system, and then that is further done by the lysosomes within each cell. Okay? They break down larger molecules into simpler and simpler materials that the cell can use. All right, so animal cells contain lysosomes, and those are organelles that contain digestive enzymes. Now, the lysosome is obviously a very important organelle. Without it, the cell would starve. It's also the most dangerous organelle within the cell. If anything happens to that organelle and it is to rupture, the stuff inside will get out. And what will it do to the cell? It will eat it. Because the stuff inside is designed to break down your food, which is made of cells and other cellular material, right? So the digestive enzymes within this lysosome are, fairly harmful were they to get out of the special membrane that makes up the lysosome. In the same way that if the stuff that was inside your stomach got out, it would start to try to digest you. It wouldn't succeed, but I mean, it would do that. Okay, so if you recall the other day when I was telling you what a cell does if it detects whether it's functioning properly or not, okay, if it detects that it's malfunctioning, it would eat itself. Those are the organelles that it will intentionally rupture in order to do that. That means plant cells can't do that. But you also don't see plants with cancer very often. Okay, they have other ways of kind of bypassing that stuff. Okay, so examples of chemoheterotrophs, obviously, big kind of top carnivores like a shark is a chemoheterotroph. Fungi, okay, we talked about athlete's foot on Friday, okay, and how it's eating you, okay, well, that's a chemoheterotroph, it's still digesting you, okay. Worms, right, they eat the organic material that's in dirt, okay, all that kind of stuff. They're all using the organic material, either living or non-living, from other organisms, okay. So it doesn't have to be a living organism. All right. I mean, obviously, if you're, like a buzzard or something, you're eating the flesh of a dead organism, but you're still consuming the organic material from something else. Okay. All right. So within an animal cell, we have a few differences, okay, or a few kind of key structural properties. The lysosome we already talked about, so that's where the digestion goes on. Okay, that's unique to animal cells. Okay, the other thing about animals is animals are mobile. And that means that their cells have to be flexible. If their cells are rigid, it would be very difficult to move. All right, our cells have to be able to change shape as we move. So animal cells have no rigid cell wall. Okay, so animal cells have no cell wall, just a cell membrane. Now, that makes them flexible, but it also makes them fragile. All right, well, fragile may not be the right word, but let's say not as stiff or protected. So what happens is inside of the animal cell, there's little things called a cytoskeleton. Okay, and you don't really see it on this diagram, but you can, these little lines here, these little kind of hashed lines that are everywhere, are little microfibers that attach to different parts of the inside of the cell membrane. And they act like kind of support cables or bungee cords. So when the cell tries to change shape too much, they kind of hold it from tearing open. Okay, so they're elastic, they're flexible, but they attach on the inside and kind of hold it. They allow it to flex and change shape, but not to tear open, right? Except in extreme circumstances, right? If you've ever pulled or torn a muscle, okay, that's essentially what has happened, is you've torn a whole bunch of cells right open, okay, right in half, and then it takes a while for them to heal up. They can move around, and some organelles actually move a fair amount, but most things kind of stay in the same vicinity. Okay? They're not locked or held into place necessarily by anything, but they tend to sort of stay in one spot for the most part. Okay, and that's mostly because they need to be in a central position to do their job or things like that. Okay, so animal cells have to be somewhat plastic. That's able to change shape, not actually made out of plastic, okay, due to the needs for mobility of animals. So, okay, animal cells have to be flexible, okay, and that's for mobility. All right, so they contain fibrous materials, okay, the cytoskeleton is what we call it, okay, that allow the cell to change shape. So maybe we'll just add that word in here, cytoskeleton. Which is kind of a misleading term. It makes you think that they got bones. Okay, bones are made of cells, not bones within cells. Okay, just so you know the difference. All right, and like we said, there's only a membrane as the outer layer. There's no layer outside of that like there is in a plant cell where there's a cell wall. Okay, another difference within the animal cells, okay, is the presence of something called centrioles. Okay, and those are not on this diagram. So we'll talk about those I'll show you what they look like when we get to the actual labeling. This diagram doesn't have them on it for whatever reason. Okay, centrioles help with cell division. Plants don't need them, because the plant cell doesn't change shape. It actually has a very rigid shape. Okay, but because an animal cell can flex and twist and do kind of weird things, it needs to have these centrioles that make sure that when it's dividing, all the DNA gets to both sides. Okay, because if the cell was to change shape during division and it didn't have these things, it's possible for more DNA to end up on one side than the other, and then both cells would likely die. Right, so these centrioles just help when the cell is dividing to make sure all the DNA gets where it's supposed to get to. Okay, plants are what we call photoautotrophs. So light self-feeder. Okay, is what photoautotroph means. They can use light to make their own food. Okay, so they can produce their own food by capturing sunlight and using its power to remove carbon from carbon dioxide, okay, as well as oxygen and hydrogen get separated from water in that process as well, and then it puts them back together in a different order, which releases oxygen for us to breathe and produces sugar for the plant to use as fuel. Okay, so when we're looking at this as a chemical reaction, okay, it's this. Okay, that's what photosynthesis looks like as a chemical reaction. Remind you of anything? Yeah, which reaction in chemistry? Yeah, it looks like a combustion reaction, except it's, well, and it's backwards, right? Right? Shouldn't the carbon and oxygen be on the reactant side? Except that no, this is the exact opposite of combustion, right? We're trying to make the stuff that would burn. That's what plants do, right? I mean, when you start a fire, it's usually plant material, right? Like a campfire is made of tree, right? So this is the exact opposite, right? We're taking the raw materials from either cellular respiration or burning or whatever, and we're turning it back into oxygen and fuel. Okay. Now, the process that a plant uses once it gets to this point is the exact opposite. Okay, we call that cellular respiration. We use that to get energy from sugar, and so do plants. Once they've produced the sugar, they want to burn it. So they carry out the exact opposite operation. Okay, which just looks like a combustion reaction. Cellular respiration is a form of combustion. Okay? Obviously, there aren't little fires, though, inside each one of your cells, just so we clear that up. All right, so if you're going to be photosynthetic, you've got to have the organelles that carry out photosynthesis. Those organelles are called chloroplasts because they contain chlorophyll, which is the stuff that carries out photosynthesis. Okay, so a chloroplast looks like this. It's got a double membrane, okay, a transparent double membrane, because obviously light needs to get through, okay, but the double membrane helps to insulate the rest of the cell from the goings-on that take place within the chloroplast. There's actually some heat that's generated as a result of photosynthesis, and so we need to insulate the cell against that. Inside are things called thylakoids. They look like stacks of coins, okay, but essentially it's within the thylakoid that photosynthesis and chlorophyll and all of that is. Okay. Now, if we're looking at the overall picture here of the plant cell, okay, yes, there's still lots of things in common, but we see the chloroplasts, and there would have to be quite a few, okay? And when we do our lab on cell anatomy next week, you'll actually see these. Chloroplasts are large enough for you to see, in addition to the nucleus and all of that kind of stuff, okay? It's surrounded by a rigid cell wall. That helps keep its shape, because plants aren't mobile. Okay, they're not ents. Okay, it's not like the Lord of the Rings and they can just get up and walk away. Okay, plants can't do that. Okay, so therefore their cells are rigid. Okay, that also helps to support the plant's growth, especially its vertical growth. Okay, it's having these strong cell walls. If you've ever seen what a plant looks like when it hasn't been watered, and unfortunately I watered mine, okay, but they start to get kind of limp. Okay, that's because the cell walls by themselves aren't strong enough to hold the plant up. Okay, so we got the cell walls, but we also got this big thing here in the middle. And that's a water vacuole. And it's basically like the inside of like a water balloon. Okay, if a balloon doesn't have any air or water in it, it's fairly like floppy. But if you fill it with water, does it become more rigid? Yeah, that's essentially what the water vacuole does. It fills up with water and pushes from the inside against the cell wall, which makes it even more stiff. Okay, and so that helps to maintain the plant. But if the plant gets dried out, then it wilts. Okay, and it just looks limp because the water vacuoles are empty and they're not able to support the plant anymore. All right, so plant cells have chloroplasts, and they have stiff cell walls and large water vacuoles. That helps keep them rigid. Those structures are not seen in animal cells. Okay, those are the primary differences. Not nearly as many things different as there are the same. Okay, questions there? All right, so like we said, lots of similarities. Okay, if we're looking at the plant cell and the animal cell, sorry, this is the plant cell, this is the animal cell. They both have a nucleus. Okay, they both have surrounding the nucleus this stuff here, which is rough endoplasmic reticulum. They have smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, there and there. I know that one's kind of dark for you guys. We got mitochondria in both. Okay, we got a Golgi apparatus in both. What's the cell filled with? Cytoplasm. Yeah, it's a fluid. Okay, it's not quite the consistency of water, but also not quite the consistency of Jello. Be maybe more like, not quite syrup, but something along that. So it's a little more viscous than water. Okay, and that just helps maintain the inside of the cell. If the cell wasn't filled with fluid, what would all the organelles do? Well, they would just fall to the bottom, right? There'd be nothing to kind of support them. They just kind of float within the cytoplasm of the cell. So a cell is filled with a fluid called cytoplasm, both plant and animal. Okay, there are various like small vacuoles within each. Okay, but yeah, we've got a lot of things that are similar. Then we got the things that are different. Okay, all of these little structures here, those are lysosomes and peroxisomes. A lysosome is a place where food is actively being digested, and a peroxisome is a place where there's just digestive enzymes and it's waiting to encounter food before it digests it. Okay. These things here, these are the centrioles that I was telling you about before. You don't have to label it because I'm going to give you a diagram here in a minute. Okay. The centrioles are what help the animal cell divide. You don't see those in plant cells. Okay. And then if we look at the plant cell, obviously we got the big water vacuole. Okay, and sometimes it's more than one. Like a plant may have several water vacuoles within, but we generally just draw it as one big one. Okay, and obviously we got all the chloroplasts, okay, that are everywhere, and then the thick, rigid cell wall surrounding the outside. Okay. Now, the thing about the wall is that it doesn't look like how most people picture it. It's not solid. Okay, it's not like that wall there. Okay, a cell wall is like a house that's in the process of being built. Okay, so they've just framed it. Can you walk through the walls? Yes. Okay, so a cell wall is really just a frame. Okay, it's made out of cellulose fibers. Okay, that's the stuff that you're supposed to get lots of in your diet. Dietary fiber. Okay, you get it by eating plants that you can't digest. Okay, so that's what the cell membrane or cell wall, sorry, is made out of. Okay, but there's holes in it, so it doesn't protect the cell in any way. Okay, the cell wall serves no protective function whatsoever. It is just there to act as a frame and support the cell. All right. But I mean, we got a terrible name. Cell wall is, I mean, it implies that it's solid, and it's not. Okay. All right. All right. Let's see here. Okay. So I want you guys to try those 5 questions here. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do those 5 questions, and then I'll go over the answers, and then we'll look at our labeling. So what's the main reason for the differences between plant and animal cells? Essentially 3 words. Was the name of this lesson. Modes of nutrition, right? That's the main reason for the differences. The way that they get their energy is different, therefore they need special structures in order to make that happen. All right, second thing, what organelle supplies plants with energy? Jake? That's the process. What organelle carries it out? No, that's their mode of nutrition. Okay? Hmm? No. What organelle within the plant cell is the one that carries out photosynthesis? The chloroplast. Okay? The chloroplast is the special organelle that carries out photosynthesis. Okay. So, what organelle supplies animal cells with energy? Actually, that's the one that burns sugar. It's present in both. But yes, you're kind of right. Which one gets the sugar? The lysosome, right? The lysosome is the thing that digests the food, okay, breaks it down into materials that are useful for energy. Okay, then the mitochondria takes those sugars and burns it using cellular respiration. Okay, question number 4. Plants and animal cells essentially transport materials in the same way. They use the same processes, diffusion, osmosis, active transport. Okay, we'll talk about those later, but they use the same processes. Why would that have been kept the same from an evolutionary perspective when so many other things have altered? Okay, because it's efficient. Exactly. It works. Okay, and when it comes to natural selection, they live by the axiom, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Okay? It works, so therefore it's still being used. Nothing better has come along, okay, in, well, a couple of billion years, okay? Nothing better has come along in terms of being able to move stuff from place to place within a cell. Okay, number 5. The nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Okay, which would have survived best in a primordial Earth? That means like 4 billion years ago, okay, or 3.5 billion years ago, that had very little oxygen or organic material available. Photoautotrophs or chemoheterotrophs? Which one would be better? Photoautotrophs, okay, because they can produce their own organic material from carbon dioxide and water and sunlight, which would have been available, okay, then they can burn it with the oxygen that they produced during photosynthesis. If you're an animal or a chemoheterotroph and you're running around trying to find something to eat, you're going to starve because there's not much to eat. There isn't a lot of organic material around, okay, in that early Earth. Right? Plants and other, kind of self-feeding organisms were the only things on Earth for a very, very long time. Right? They had to build up in large enough amounts that it was worthwhile for something to try to eat them. That's a good question. There's a lot of research on that. The most likely idea is that, and they've kind of replicated this in the lab, Earth's early atmosphere was mostly ammonia, carbon dioxide, water vapor. Like it was toxic. It was nothing like it is today. If you arc electricity through that mixture, organic molecules like proteins and amino acids and stuff like that can actually be produced simply by arcing electricity through there. Well, lightning is an electrical arc. So when there was lightning in the early atmosphere, it could have produced the organic molecules necessary for life to begin. That's the abiotic synthesis of life idea. Okay, yeah. All right. Questions on that? Okay. All right. So we'll start with, which cell is this? Plant or animal? Good, because it was on the top of the sheet. You should all have got that one right. Okay. All right. So we got the animal cell first here. So I'm going to start right up here with this little, what looks like an empty. Yeah, well, like it looks like an egg, but it's actually just like a vesicle. Okay, a vesicle is basically just a membrane enclosed area. All right, so this one looks empty. It's not really empty. What's inside of it are digestive enzymes. Okay, there's no food in it yet, so it's not a lysosome yet. It is, in fact, a peroxisome. Okay, so it contains the digestive enzymes and chemicals, but has not yet encountered any food particles to digest. All right, we're going to go clockwise from there. Okay, so beside that, okay, clockwise from that, you can see these kind of faded little thread-looking things here. Don't label them as faded thread-looking things. Okay, these are part of the cytoskeleton. They are what we call microfibers. Okay. There's lots of different things that are actually part of the cytoskeleton, so that's why I'm also labeling it cytoskeleton. On a quiz or a test, cytoskeleton will be sufficient, because sometimes on a diagram, it's hard to tell whether it's a fiber, a filament, or a tubule. Okay, and all of those are all part of the cytoskeleton. So cytoskeleton is a good general answer if you see something that looks like that. All right, the big sausage-looking thing. Mitochondria, right? And the mitochondria burns sugar for energy. Okay, so the sugar that's produced by digestion of food goes there, and then it's broken down in what looks like a combustion reaction to produce energy, carbon dioxide, and water. All right, and as with all animal cell diagrams, even though I don't know why, there's a flagellum on here. Okay, we can label it. I'm never going to ask you to on a diagram, but that's a flagellum. All right, next three things all have to do with the big purple thingy. The big purple thingy is the nucleus. All right, but the first label is just pointing at the outside of it. What do we call the thing that goes around anything that's cell related? Oh, not wall. Starts with M. Membrane. Yeah, so this is the nuclear membrane. Right? The job of the nuclear membrane is to keep stuff out of the nucleus. Right? There is no reason for basically anything to go into the nucleus. Right? The exception being small strands of nuclear material. That would be DNA or RNA. Those can go in or out, but that's it. Okay? Why do we want to keep stuff out of the nucleus? What's in there? Yeah, important stuff. Your DNA. Okay? The only copy of all the information your cell needs to do everything it needs to do is kept in there. So that thing needs to be secure like a vault. All right? Nothing can get in there, because if stuff gets in there, the nuclear material could be damaged. And if it's damaged, then there's something your cell's not going to be able to do right, and that's going to be trouble. All right? So the nuclear membrane is a very rigid barrier to anything going in. If that wasn't the part that was damaged, yes. Like if the part of the DNA that tells it something is wrong is damaged, then it becomes cancerous. Okay, but yeah, usually if that happens, I mean the cell has certain abilities to repair DNA. Okay, if it's something repairable, fine. But if it's a major break, the cell's pretty much screwed. Okay, at that point.
Could another cell protect the
No. No. Okay. So next line down is pointing at the nucleus itself. Okay, I know that along the way, a very well-meaning elementary school teacher or maybe even junior high teacher told you that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. It's not. Okay, this is like the other thing that just triggers me. Like triangles, that triggers me. Okay, it is not a brain. A brain is a organ made of many cells interacting and communicating, blah, blah, blah. That's not this. Okay, the nucleus doesn't make any like decisions or anything like that. It doesn't necessarily control anything. It just houses all the information necessary to carry out all the basic functions of the organism. Okay, it is a vault for storing DNA. Okay, does the DNA allow your cell to do everything it needs to do? Yes, that's why there's that analogy. It's like a brain. Yeah, I can buy it's like a brain, but not very much like one. It's less like one than it's like one. Okay, so don't write brain of the cell. If you write brain of the cell on a quiz or an exam, I will give you a 0 on the whole test. Okay, it's not the brain of the cell. Okay, it's, if anything, it's a library. That's where all the information is kept. Okay, it's more like a library than it is like a brain. Okay, if your cell needs to do something, it goes here. Okay, and it gets the information it needs, and then it does it. Okay, that's how proteins are made. Okay, if your cell needs to make a certain protein, it sends a message to the nucleus that says, hey, copy out the instructions that tell us how to do that and send us a copy. And that's what it does. It copies that section of the DNA, it sends out a copy to the place where the proteins are being built. The protein is built, and then that piece of DNA is either recycled or sent back. Okay. All right. The big purple thing inside the purple thingy is called the nucleolus. So spelling counts here. Okay. Nucleus and nucleolus look kind of alike, and sometimes people don't know which one it is, and they try this stunt. Oh, it's the Oh, Mr. Cordero, be nice, right? I didn't really know which one it was, so I wrote them both. No, it's wrong. Okay, you just spelled it wrong. Okay, nice try, but no. Well, then I'm going to ask you, which one is it? Wrong. Yeah. Okay. So the nucleolus is a separate structure within the nucleus, and what it does is it's the thing that makes those copies that we just talked about. If the cell needs to make something, the nucleolus is kind of the librarian. Okay, it goes to the DNA, it finds the section you need, it makes a copy of it, and makes sure it gets out where it's supposed to go. Essentially, it controls the synthesis of proteins. Okay, is the job of it. Okay, next one here, these little dots. Okay, the little dots are called ribosomes. They're everywhere because they have a very important job. They make protein. They're the things that can take the DNA that the nucleus is sent out, read it, and make what needs to be made. They're like a foreman, okay, like a shop foreman or a site foreman. Okay, they're capable of reading the instructions, knowing what things have to go on, and making sure they happen in the right order. Okay. All right, and then right below that, okay, is the rough endoplasmic reticulum. We'll talk about that tomorrow. I won't even write it down. It'll take you too long to write it.